The iron gates of the Oakhaven Cemetery groaned with a familiar, mournful sound as Ilara pushed them open. The morning mist clung to the manicured lawns and marble headstones like a shroud, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. For Ilara, this was not a place of dread, but a sanctuary. Her worn, second-hand shoes, their soles thin as parchment, made soft, squelching sounds on the gravel path, a rhythm as constant as the beat of her own grieving heart. Her threadbare coat was no match for the autumn chill, but the cold was a minor discomfort, a fleeting sensation compared to the permanent winter that had settled within her. Her destination was a simple, modest headstone nestled in a quieter corner, away from the grand mausoleums and ornate angels. It read, Lily Chen. Beloved daughter. A light extinguished too soon. Ilara's calloused fingers, chapped and red from a lifetime of menial labor, traced the edged letters with a tenderness reserved for a sleeping child. She then placed her daily offering at the base of the stone, a single, perfect sunflower, its vibrant yellow face a defiant challenge to the grey gloom of the cemetery. It was an extravagance, this daily flower, a luxury that often meant skipping a meal. But for her daughter, for her Lily, no cost was too high. The ritual was always the same. She would clear away any stray leaves, smooth the earth over the plot, and then she would sit, her knees protesting as they met the cold ground. She did not speak aloud, her words were carried on the silent currents of her memory. She would recount her day, the small indignities of her life as a cleaner in a soulless office building, the kind smile from a stranger, the way the light had hit a puddle and reminded her of Lily's laughter. These silent monologues were her confession, her prayer, her only way to bridge the chasm that death had carved between them. After precisely 30 minutes, she would rise, her body stiff, her heart a fraction lighter for having unburdened itself. She would touch the headstone once more, a final, fleeting connection, and then retreat, leaving the sunflower as a beacon of her enduring love. She never noticed the other, far more extravagant bouquet of white orchids that always appeared on the adjacent grave, a grave so new its marble still gleamed with factory polish. A week passed, each day a carbon copy of the last. The mist grew thicker, the air sharper. Ilara's routine was her anchor, the one stable point in a life adrift on a sea of poverty and loss. She had just settled into her familiar position, her silent conversation with Lily beginning, when a shift in the atmosphere prickled the hairs on the back of her neck. It was the sound of footsteps, not the shuffling gait of an elderly mourner, but the crisp, authoritative click of expensive leather soles on gravel. A shadow, long and imposing, fell over Lily's grave, merging with her own. Ilara's heart seized. Her first, instinctual fear was that of a trespasser being caught. Was she not allowed to be here? Had some rule changed? She slowly, painfully, raised her head. The man standing before her was a study in stark contrast to her own existence. He was tall, wrapped in a wool overcoat that screamed of bespoke tailoring and a price tag that could have covered her rent for a year. His face was sharp, intelligent, but etched with a grief so profound it seemed to have carved hollows beneath his cheekbones. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were not angry, but filled with a bewildering intensity as they stared not at her, but at the sunflower on her daughter's grave. He stood there for a long moment, the silence between them stretching into an eternity. Ilara remained frozen, a mouse under the gaze of a hawk. Finally, his gaze shifted from the flower to her face, taking in her worn coat, her work-roughened hands, the undeniable map of hardship etched into her features. When he spoke, his voice was low, gravelly with an emotion she couldn't name, but it wasn't hostility. "That is my wife's grave you are tending," he said, his words measured, each one dropping into the silence like a stone in a still pond. He gestured slightly with a gloved hand towards the magnificent, adjacent marble headstone. Ilara's eyes flickered to it, truly seeing it for the first time. Eleanor Vance, it read. Beloved wife. A life of grace and love. And beneath the name, the dates that confirmed she had died on the exact same day as Lily. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The two graves, side by side, the poor woman and the unseen CEO, their lives violently intertwined by a single, catastrophic moment. Ilara could only stare, her mind reeling, unable to form a single coherent thought in the face of this impossible connection. The man, whose name was Alexander Vance, did not leave. Instead, he slowly lowered himself onto the bench opposite the two graves, his movements devoid of their usual command, replaced by a weary heaviness. He did not look at Ilara with pity or suspicion, but with a dawning, horrifying comprehension. The Daily Sunflower, the meticulously tended plot. This was not the work of a paid groundskeeper. This was the ritual of a mother. He began to visit at the same time as her. At first, their interactions were nothing more than silent, parallel acts of mourning. He would place his orchids on Eleanor's grave, she would place her sunflower on Lily's. They existed in a bubble of shared, yet separate, sorrow. But one day, as a cold rain began to fall, Alexander did not immediately leave after his ritual. He watched as Ilara, oblivious to the worsening weather, remained at her daughter's side, her thin coat quickly becoming soaked. A memory, sharp and painful, flashed in Alexander's mind: the police report, the chaotic scene of the accident, the fact that his wife's car had not been the only one involved. There had been a second vehicle, a small, battered sedan. A student, they had said. A young woman named Lily Chen. He had been so consumed by his own loss, so shielded by his lawyers and advisors, that he had deliberately avoided the details of the other victim. It was a pain he had not been equipped to face. But now, face to face with the mother of the other life lost that day, the abstract became devastatingly real. He stood and walked over to her, opening a large, sturdy umbrella he carried, holding it over both of them. Ilara flinched at his proximity, but he made no other move. They stood like that for long minutes, two strangers sheltering under a single canopy, the rain drumming a funeral dirge above them, the graves of their loved ones silently binding them together in a tragedy they had both, until this moment, endured alone. The shared shelter of the umbrella broke a dam of unspoken communication. The next day, when Alexander arrived, he found a small, thermos flask left on the bench beside a neatly folded note. The note, written in a careful, elegant script that belied Ilara's rough appearance, simply read, "For the cold. Ilara." Inside the thermos was a simple, fragrant ginger tea. It was a gesture of such profound, simple kindness that it left Alexander speechless. He, who was accustomed to grand gestures and expensive gifts, was utterly disarmed by this offering from a woman who had so little. He began to bring things, too. Not money or anything that could be misconstrued as charity, for he instinctively understood her pride. A warm, woolen blanket to drape over the bench. A book of poetry he had often read to Eleanor. They never spoke of the accident. Their communication was built on these small, tangible acts of care, a silent language of mutual support. But the truth of that day was a spectre that hung between them, growing more substantial with each meeting. Alexander, driven by a need he could no longer suppress, used his resources to finally access the full, unvarnished police report he had previously avoided. Sitting in his sterile, high-rise office, a world away from the damp cemetery, he read the cold, clinical details. The rain-slicked road. His wife, Eleanor, rushing to a meeting, distracted. Her car, a powerful luxury vehicle, hydroplaning, crossing the center line. The impact with the small, oncoming sedan. The conclusion: an accident, a tragic confluence of weather and split-second timing. No one was criminally at fault.